The siren wailed closer as Emma bolted upright in bed, her pulse thundering in her ears while Avery squeezed her hand in the darkness. "It's them again," Avery murmured, her voice trembling with the familiar dread of their nosy neighbors who had made no secret of their disgust at two women living together openly in this upscale American suburb outside Seattle. But when the police officer's flashlight beam cut through the window and the knock turned into a demand for entry over a complaint of immoral conduct and suspected illegal occupancy, the couple had no idea that this midnight raid would expose a truth that would ignite a firestorm threatening their careers, their families, and the very foundation of their love. Emma grabbed her robe and forced a calm she didn't feel, unlocking the door to find two officers on the porch and a cluster of neighbors already gathering on the lawn, flashlights bobbing like accusatory fingers. "We received a report that you're trespassing on this property and engaging in behavior that's disturbing the peace," the taller officer said, his tone flat but his eyes flicking between them with obvious discomfort. Avery stood just behind her, arms crossed tight across her chest, the same protective stance she'd taken the night their first neighbor had slammed the door in their faces 2 years ago after learning they were a couple. "Show me the warrant," Emma replied evenly, her lawyer instincts kicking in even at 2 a.m. She had built her career on staying cool under pressure at the firm downtown, where she was up for partner in 6 weeks. The second officer shifted awkwardly. "It's a welfare check based on a neighbor's concern, ma'am. They claim you don't belong here and that your arrangement is against the community standards." The word arrangement landed like a slap. From the lawn, Mrs. Hargrove from next door shouted, "They're not even on the deed. This whole block is supposed to be family-friendly." Emma felt Avery's fingers dig into her arm, but she kept her voice level. "Officers, I suggest you check the county records right now. This entire 20-acre parcel, including every house on it, is owned by Emma Caldwell and Avery Thompson. We closed on the development 2 years ago after my aunt passed and left it to me. These people are our tenants under long-term leases." The officers exchanged glances, then the taller one pulled out his tablet. Minutes stretched into an eternity of typing and radio static, while the neighbors muttered about "those two" and "sin in our backyard." When the screen finally lit up with the deed, the officer's eyebrows shot up. "Well, I'll be damned. Public records confirm it. You two are the legal owners of the entire neighborhood. Complaints dismissed." The silence that followed was deafening. Mrs. Hargrove's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. One of the men in the crowd actually took a step back. Avery let out a shaky breath that sounded almost like a laugh, but Emma could feel the tremor in her hand. This wasn't victory. It was the match that would light the fuse. By sunrise, the local news van was parked at the curb. A reporter with perfect hair thrust a microphone toward Emma as she stepped outside for the paper. "Ms. Caldwell, how does it feel to be accused of trespassing on your own land simply because you're in a same-sex relationship?" Emma's stomach twisted. She had spent years keeping their personal life quiet at the firm, where the senior partners still golfed with conservative clients. Now the secret was exploding across every phone screen in the city. Avery pulled her back inside, slamming the door. "We say nothing until we have a plan," she whispered, but her eyes already carried the weight of what was coming. Emma's phone buzzed nonstop. Her mother in Florida left a voicemail that ended in tears. "How could you let this happen? The whole family's seeing this." Avery's phone lit up too, her conservative brother in Texas demanding she come home and fix this mess. The partners at the firm texted, "Emergency meeting at 9. Image concerns." Emma sank onto the couch, the same couch where she and Avery had celebrated buying the land with cheap champagne and promises of forever. Now forever felt like it might last until the next news cycle. Outside, more neighbors gathered, signs appearing that read "Protect our values." Emma looked at Avery and saw the same question in her eyes they had avoided for months. How much were they willing to lose to stay together? The day blurred into strategy sessions. Emma drafted a cease and desist for defamation while Avery paced, suggesting they just ignore it and let the leases run out quietly. "Fighting back will only make them dig deeper," Avery argued, her nurse scrub still on from the night shift she had almost missed. But Emma knew silence had never protected them before. By afternoon, the story had hit national feeds with headlines twisting the facts. "Lesbian landlords use police to silence neighbors." Their quiet life on the land they had poured every savings into was now public property. And the real storm was only beginning. Emma stared at the conference room glass, watching her reflection while the senior partners circled like sharks. "This isn't about your personal life, Emma," Richard Harlan said, but his tone suggested otherwise. "It's about optics. 3 major clients have already called asking if the firm represents that kind of controversy. We need you to issue a statement distancing the practice." Distancing. The word burned. She had billed more hours last quarter than any associate, closed the Henderson merger that saved the firm millions. Yet one viral video of police on her porch and suddenly she was a liability. Across town at Seattle General, Avery dodged questions from colleagues in the break room. "So the whole neighborhood is yours?" her supervisor asked with forced cheer. "That's something." But the whispers followed her down the halls. "Did you hear they called the cops on them for being gay?" Avery's hand shook as she prepped in 4-line. She had chosen nursing to help people, not to become the story everyone pitted. When her phone rang during rounds, it was her mother. "Avery Marie Thompson, you get on a plane tonight. Your father saw the news. He's having chest pains again." The guilt hit like a truck. Avery's parents had barely tolerated her coming out 5 years ago. Now the public humiliation might actually kill them. Emma met Avery at their favorite coffee shop 2 blocks from the property line, the one place they could still pretend normalcy existed. "I told the partners I'd handle it privately," Emma said, sliding a latte across the table. Avery's eyes were red-rimmed. "And I told my mom we're not breaking up to make them comfortable." They sat in silence, fingers intertwined under the table where no one could see. Outside the window, a car slowed, and the driver snapped a photo with his phone. Emma's stomach dropped. The scandal was no longer local, it was everywhere. That evening the first lawsuit landed via certified mail. The Hargroves and 3 other leaseholders claimed emotional distress and breach of quiet enjoyment due to the immoral atmosphere Emma and Avery supposedly created. The irony was almost funny. The owners being sued by their own tenants for owning the land. Emma spread the papers across the kitchen island while Avery cooked pasta neither of them would eat. "We countersue for defamation," Emma said firmly. "Public records prove everything. We win in court and the story dies." Avery set the spoon down harder than necessary. "Or we let them buy out their leases at a discount and move somewhere no one knows us. Your partnership, my promotion, our families. They're all on the line because we refuse to hide." The words hung between them like smoke. Emma felt the familiar panic rising. The same panic that had kept her from posting a single photo of them together on social media for years. "Running away is what they want," she countered. "If we fold now, every bigot with a sign wins." The argument escalated until Avery slammed the bedroom door. Emma slept on the couch for the first time in their 6-year relationship, staring at the ceiling and replaying every decision that had led them here. Buying the land to build equity, refusing to closet themselves when neighbors complained, believing love could be enough. At 3 a.m. her phone lit up with a text from a reporter offering money for an exclusive interview. She deleted it, but the temptation lingered. Money could pay legal fees. Exposure could end her career. Morning brought worse news. A partner at the firm forwarded an email from their biggest client. "We cannot be associated with any firm whose attorneys appear in tabloid stories about lesbian scandals." Emma's promotion meeting was cancelled indefinitely. She drove home in a daze, passing the for sale signs some neighbors had planted overnight as a message. Avery was waiting on the porch, her scrubs wrinkled from another double shift. "My brother booked me a ticket to Texas," she said quietly. "He says if I don't come fix my image, he'll tell Mom the whole story about how we met." Emma pulled her into a hug right there in the open. "Cameras be damned. We fight together or not at all." But even as she said it, she wondered if she was asking Avery to sacrifice her family for a principle. The land they owned legally was becoming a prison of their own making. That night they lay awake listening to car doors slamming as more reporters arrived. The crisis was no longer about ownership. It was about whether their love could survive being dragged into the spotlight and torn apart by everyone who claimed to know what was right. The car accident happened on a Tuesday. Emma was rushing to file the countersuit when a paparazzi van cut her off on the highway. Metal screeched, Airbags deployed. And suddenly she was staring at her own blood on the steering wheel while sirens wailed again. Avery arrived at the hospital in tears, still wearing her nurse badge, demanding updates from colleagues who now looked at her with a mix of pity and curiosity. Minor concussion and whiplash, the doctor said, but the real damage was invisible. Emma's hands shook when she signed the discharge papers. The firm had already sent flowers with a card that read, "Wishing you a speedy recovery." And discretion. Back home the media had doubled. A local anchor camped at the gate with a live truck. Emma's mother flew in unannounced, suitcase in hand and disappointment in every line of her face. "I raised you to be smart, not to make yourself a target," she said over coffee that tasted like ash. Avery stayed in the kitchen, giving them space, but Emma caught her wiping tears when she thought no one saw. That night the three of them sat in awkward silence while the TV in the background replayed the police bodycam footage someone had leaked. Emma's own voice sounded so small. "We own the entire neighborhood." The next morning brought the firm's ultimatum via email. "Effective immediately, your partnership track is paused pending resolution of this public matter." Emma read it twice, then forwarded it to Avery without comment. Avery's response was to book 2 tickets to a tiny cabin in the Olympic Mountains for the weekend. "We need one night where no one can reach us," she insisted. They drove in silence, the rain matching their mood. At the cabin they built a fire, and finally talked about the thing they had avoided for months. What if the price of staying together was everything else? Emma stared into the flames. "I keep thinking if I had just kept my head down at work, none of this." Avery cut her off gently. "And if I had never introduced you to my family as my girlfriend, maybe they'd still talk to me." The honesty hurt more than any headline. They made love for the first time since the police came, slow and desperate, as if touch alone could rewrite the narrative. But in the morning the cabin Wi-Fi betrayed them with new alerts. The Hargroves had gone on a morning show claiming the couple used their lifestyle to intimidate tenants. Avery's brother texted, "Mom's in the ER. Stress." They drove back to find Emma's mother packing. "I can't watch you destroy yourself," she said. "Call me when you've come to your senses." The door closed with finality. Avery stood in the hallway, arms wrapped around herself. "My promotion interview is tomorrow." They moved it up because of public interest concerns. Emma wanted to promise it would be okay, but the word stuck. That afternoon she met with a crisis PR expert who advised a soft interview. Frame it as 2 successful women defending their American dream. Avery refused to participate. "I'm not performing our love for ratings." The tension between them grew tauter than ever. Emma spent nights drafting legal arguments while Avery worked extra shifts to avoid the house. Neighbors filed a petition to rezone the land, claiming the owners created a hostile environment. Emma's concussion headaches worsened under the stress. One evening Avery found her crying in the home office, surrounded by court filings. "I don't know if I can protect us both," Emma admitted. Avery knelt beside her. "Then maybe we stop trying to protect the world and just protect each other." But the world refused to let them. A process server arrived at midnight with papers for a new lawsuit, this one from a former client citing reputational harm. The decisions were no longer theoretical. Each choice now carried the weight of their entire future. The deposition room smelled of stale coffee and desperation. Emma sat across from the Hargroves' attorney, Avery beside her for moral support only. "Ms. Caldwell, isn't it true you purchased this land specifically to create an enclave for your alternative lifestyle?" The question was so blatantly homophobic that even the court reporter flinched. Emma's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. The transcript would leak within hours. Outside, Avery gripped her hand so tightly the knuckles turned white. "We walk away from this deposition and they win," Emma whispered. Avery didn't answer. That night the interview offer came from a national morning show. Exclusive, lesbian landowners fight back. The producer promised sympathetic framing. Emma wanted to do it. Avery begged her not to. "Once you go on camera, there's no taking it back. Your mother, my family, the firm, they'll never forgive the spotlight." The argument lasted until dawn. Emma finally compromised. She would issue a written statement only. But the statement backfired spectacularly. Comment sections filled with accusations that they were using their money to silence good Christian families. Work imploded next. Emma arrived at the office to find her cases reassigned and her office boxed up. Temporary leave, HR called it. She drove home in a fog, passing the now familiar news vans. Avery met her at the door with news of her own. The hospital had placed her on administrative leave pending an internal review of community impact. They stood in the kitchen staring at each other, suddenly both unemployed because of a single false police call. Avery's brother flew in uninvited. He cornered Emma on the porch while Avery was inside. "You did this to her. My sister was happy until you dragged her into your world." Emma held her ground. "Your sister chose me. Every day she chooses me." But the words felt hollow when Avery emerged crying after the conversation. That evening they received an anonymous death threat in the mail. "God hates what you do. Leave town." The police took a report but offered little hope. Emma installed security cameras with her last savings. The breaking point came during a quiet dinner. Avery set down her fork. "I think we should sell the land. Take the money, move to a new state, start over where no one knows us." Emma felt the floor drop away. "Sell the legacy my aunt left me? Let the bigots win." Avery's voice cracked. "I'm losing my family. You're losing your career. How much more are we supposed to bleed for this property?" The question echoed through the house they had built together. Emma wanted to scream that running was surrender, but the fear in Avery's eyes stopped her. For the first time she wondered if courage and love could actually be the same thing. Media helicopters circled the property the next day after someone leaked the death threat. Emma watched from the window as Avery packed an overnight bag. "I'm going to my cousin's for a few days. I need space to think." The door closed softly, but the sound cracked something inside Emma. Alone in the house they owned free and clear, she realized the real trespass wasn't the neighbor's accusation. It was the fear that had started to divide them. She opened her laptop and began drafting the hardest document of her life. A public statement that might save their relationship or destroy it forever. Emma posted the statement at 3 a.m. when the world felt quietest. "We are two women who fell in love, bought land with honest money, and asked only to live peacefully. The hatred directed at us says far more about the accusers than it does about our home." By sunrise it had gone viral. Support poured in from strangers. Death threats tripled. Avery called from her cousins at 7 a.m., voice raw. "You did it without me." But there was pride mixed with the hurt. The firm fired her officially that afternoon. Emma sat on the porch steps watching the moving truck the Hargroves had rented, half expecting them to leave voluntarily. Instead they filed an injunction to stop any eviction proceedings. Avery's mother called her directly. "Come home alone and we'll forget this ever happened." Avery hung up on her, then turned to Emma with tears streaming. "I choose you. Every single time." The words should have felt like victory, but they tasted like goodbye to everything else. The court date arrived amid pouring rain. Emma represented herself after her own lawyer dropped her over conflicting publicity. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, listened to the neighbors' claims of moral distress and then turned to the deed. "Let me get this straight. You signed leases with the legal owners and now object to their personal lives." The ruling came swift. All lawsuits dismissed, leases enforceable, and a warning to the neighbors about harassment charges. Outside the courthouse cameras flashed. Emma and Avery walked out hand in hand for the first time publicly. But winning in court didn't stop the bleeding. Emma's mother stopped answering calls. Avery's brother posted a public letter disowning her. The hospital offered Avery her job back with a demotion. She declined. They sat together on their porch that night, the same porch where police had stood months earlier, watching the neighborhood lights flicker. "We still own every inch of this land," Emma said softly. "But maybe home was never about the dirt." Avery leaned her head on Emma's shoulder. "Home was always you." Yet the final test came at dawn. A process server delivered one last envelope. The firm was suing Emma for breach of fiduciary duty, related to client confidentiality during the scandal. The amount sought would wipe out their savings and force sale of part of the land. Emma read the papers while Avery made coffee. "We can fight this too," Avery said. but her voice carried exhaustion. Emma looked at the woman she loved more than any legacy, and made the choice she had feared most. Or we sell the whole parcel, pay everything off, and walk away clean. The decision felt like dying and being reborn at the same time. They listed the entire 20 acres the following week. Offers poured in, some from developers who wanted to erase every trace of their story. Emma and Avery chose a local buyer who promised to honor existing leases and keep the neighborhood intact. Closing day felt surreal. Signing away the land that had once been their everything while holding hands under the table. The check cleared their debts and left enough to start fresh in a quiet coastal town no one had heard of. Moving day brought one last surprise. Mrs. Hargrove knocked on the door, eyes downcast. "I was wrong," she said simply. "My son came out last month. Seeing you two fight for your home made me realize what I almost destroyed." Emma accepted the apology without fanfare. Some wounds healed slower than others. As the last box went into the truck, Avery turned to Emma. "We lost almost everything." Emma kissed her forehead. "We kept each other. That's the only thing that was ever truly ours." They drove south with the windows down, radio off, letting the silence feel like peace for the first time in months. Behind them the neighborhood faded into memory. Ahead lay a small house by the ocean where no one knew their names and no one cared who they loved. Emma glanced at Avery in the passenger seat and saw the woman she had fallen for all those years ago. Stronger now, braver. The scandals, the lawsuits, the family fractures. All of it had carved them into something unbreakable. Months later, settled in their new life, Emma received a letter from her old firm offering reinstatement with full partnership. She read it aloud to Avery over breakfast. They laughed until they cried, then burned the letter in the fireplace. Some doors stayed closed for a reason. Their new neighbors waved hello without knowing their history. Avery started a small private nursing practice. Emma opened a solo law office focused on civil rights cases. Life moved forward, quieter but infinitely more honest. Yet every evening when they walked the beach hand in hand, the old question lingered beneath the waves. They had paid the price of courage with jobs, family, and the land itself. Was the cost worth it? True or false? In the face of societal pressure, silence protects love more than courage ever could?